Donald Trump is officially waging his war on transgenderism. So in this video, we're going to see what he said he's going to do when he takes office. We're going to see if this is a good thing from a biblical point of view. And then lastly, we're going to see if this is actually going to work from a biblical point of view. So let's dive in.
With the stroke of my pen on day one, we're going to stop the transgender lunacy. And I will sign executive orders to end child sexual mutilation, get transgender out of the military and out of our elementary schools and middle schools and high school. And we will keep men out of women's sports. And that will likewise be done on day one. Should I do day one, day two, or day three? How about day one, right?
Now, this is not...
Okay, I find it hilarious how Donald Trump makes such big things seem so easy. Like on day one, at the stroke of a pen, I will get this out of the military and out of school and no child mutilation. It's so Donald Trump. So there you've heard it. And this is consistent with what he was saying, because he's a big part of his political campaign was campaigning to being for you, whereas Kamala Harris was for they, them. They ran that advert during the sports TV shows, and it was supposedly one of the best political campaigns ever, or political adverts done in recent history. So is this a good thing? Eradicating transgenderism as an ideology from schools, from military, from healthcare as well, with puberty blockers, etc., etc. Well, from a biblical point of view, let's think about this. So the nuclear family is one of the most important institutions in all creation. I always say this: before God created a government, before God created a school, before he created a hospital, he created a family. He made Adam, formed Eve. Together, they would produce offspring. And that was essential for God's plan to populate the earth. Because not only does it reflect his image, where as men and women, when we come together and in our families, we show the image of God. We show the strength of the husband, we show the fertility of a wife, we show the sacrificial love and raising of children. So from a spiritual point of view, the family is so essential, and it's essential for the flourishing of society as well, because we know that the way that children are to be raised is primarily by loving fathers, loving wives that come together to raise children. So any policy that supports the flourishing of the family is a good policy. This is what God says in Malachi 2:15. He says, did he not make them one with a portion of his spirit in their union? And what was God seeking? This is talking about making Adam and Eve and forming marriage. He was seeking godly offspring. So God wants us to have children and raise them in the fear of the Lord. So obviously we need to encourage families. So what's happening with transgenderism is that young boys are not being encouraged to be men. Young girls are not being encouraged to be women. And so the next generation of potential husbands and fathers is being systematically obliterated. Literally, you've got less men that are prepared to be loving sacrificial men, less women that are prepared to be loving women, because the girls want to be men and the boys want to be women. And so any policy that counters that, I think, is a good policy and one that can be used for good. Now, I'm not saying that when he signs these executive orders, the whole world is going to be perfected. We know this world will be perfected when Jesus comes back, when Jesus recreates, when Jesus brings a new heaven and a new earth. But in the meantime, we can try and make the world a better place. So it is a good policy from a biblical point of view. But will the policy work? Now, to answer that question about whether the policy will actually be effective or not, we need to think about what Trump has said about transgenderism in the past, and we need to think about the framing of this all. You see, this is not the first time Donald Trump has signed talked about signing executive orders around transgenderism. In his first term, he declared that he would no longer accept or allow trans people in the military. Okay, so this has happened before, but look at the reason for it. The reason was tremendous medical cost and disruption. That was what he tweeted in 2017. So the framing of the transgender issue was not theological. It was not even social. It was economic. And so what did Biden come and do? Well, immediately he reversed that policy. You see, if this is just an economic issue, then the people who support transgenderism will just come and say, well, this is worth spending money on. Even if it's expensive, it's worth spending money on. So they'll just immediately reverse it. The problem was not just the policy. The problem was actually the framing that the policy was within. And so now, if Trump is signing these orders, how is he framing the matter? Like, at the moment, it's being framed from the lens of common sense, right? It's being framed from the lens of common sense. And I think there's a danger in just framing the policy from a place of common sense. I think the danger is that people who think differently will apply different common sense. And you'll have a big generational divide. So you'll have younger people who are much more sympathetic to left liberal ideologies and much more sympathetic to secular humanism, who will see this as a common sense issue. And so as they come forward, as they grow, there's a risk that all this talk could literally just die out with with all the generation as they die out, right? We can't just frame this from that perspective. The problem is, as societies are moving away from biblical Christianity, they're turning towards secular humanism. Secular humanism says there is no God, and that me as an individual, I am the most important thing in my life. My job is to live my life for my joy, for my pleasure, and for my happiness. And when you approach things from that perspective, you're more likely to make decisions that satisfy your immediate desires. And so if a boy is bullied because he's not manly enough and he likes playing with girls, and he realizes if I become trans, then I get all this affirmation from these left-wingers, I get all this praise, Bruce Jenner becomes Caitlyn Jenner and immediately becomes Woman of the Year. If I do that, I can... And you see how a society that is taught to gratify self is a society that's always going to be at risk of falling into those kind of traps. So this cannot be framed purely from a common sense perspective. It has to be framed from a ontological perspective. It has to be framed from who we are as people. What is the purpose of man? Okay, what is our purpose as man? What is the purpose of man and what is the purpose of woman? So in order for this to last, Donald Trump Republicans have to present this as significant to our existence as people, that men are called to behave in a particular way, women are called to behave in a particular way. This kind of law cannot exist in a feminist culture that wants to dismantle any distinction between men and women. This kind of thing can only exist in the culture that surrenders to the way that God has created us to be. You know, the gospel in Galatians, Paul talks about how the law, and here he's not speaking about Donald Trump's executive orders, he's speaking about the Mosaic law. The Mosaic law could not make people righteous because laws in and of themselves are not enough to change hearts. So what Donald Trump is doing with this bill, with his executive orders, will not change the hearts of people who want transgender surgery. It will not change the hearts of people who want to, it can restrain them, which is a good thing, and laws should restrain, but it will not change their hearts. In order for the hearts to be changed, we must come to a knowledge of Jesus. We must come to faith in Jesus, and we must see how God has designed us to fashion. So men need to be comfortable being men, not just men, but God-fearing men that serve him. Women need to be comfortable being God-fearing women that serve him. And so what we as Christians need to do, whilst we celebrate laws that restrain evil, is to be sharing our identity as people made in the image of God, sharing the gospel so that people will be saved. And as a society, we won't even desire transgenderism. Instead, we'll desire for young boys to grow up to be godly men. That, as Ephesians 5 says, what do godly husbands do? Husbands love their wives as Christ loved the church. So they sacrifice for their wives. They put themselves in harm's way for their wives. They use their strength and they use their gifts, their logical thinking, their reasoning to sacrifice for their wives and for their families. And what do? Women, godly women, come alongside their husbands and submit to them to serve. And even if you're not married, you can model and mimic those characteristics. Men called to lead and women called to submit to their husband's leadership and work together. That we can manifest these things to some degree, whether we're married or not. These, I think, are the ontological framing, the ways we ontologically frame this issue, so that as a society, we come to cherish the fact that we have strong men and we have godly women. And we would not even desire transgenderism and will desire to live the way that God has called us to live. But what do you think about this law? Do you think this law is a good law? Do you think this law will hold up? Do you think it will be effective? Let me know in the comments. If you like this video and you want to be a part of a Christ-centered community standing for Christ in a secular culture, then consider becoming a member of our locals community. You can become a member for free, or if you want to support the ministry, you can become a supporter. I will see you there. Peace and blessings. And that is a wrap for today. Not today. He said I'm moving to the USA. I'm with you, baby. I'm with you, baby. But yeah, enough of this. I'm gonna come downstairs and come and see. Oh, I need to cut this out. Save them as new clips. So I've got them there, but then I'm going to come downstairs. We'll chill, have lunch, and then I'll upload them later on. See you soon, my love. Mwah.